Tuesday, May 12th, 2015. The time is 10 a.m. It is my pleasure to call to order the State of Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance, the Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers. Ms. Lisa Mosley, will you please call the roll?
Mark Carthrin.
Here.
Robert Helms.
Here.
David Neal.
Here.
W.T. Patterson. Jane Gray Sal.
Here.
Robert Starkey.
Here.
Anita Taylor. Mr. President, we have 5 out of the 7 board members present.
Thank you. We now have a quorum. We'll continue the meeting as planned. We'll now adopt the agenda.
Move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Sal and a second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is adopted. All right. Now do the review your minutes from the last meeting.
Motion to accept the minutes as written.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Helms, a second from Mr. Howe. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we have an agreed order, and we'll hear from Ellery Richardson, our Assistant General Counsel.
This agreed order is for New Heritage Chapel, which is an unlicensed establishment, and Melvin Shaw, who at the time was an apprentice funeral director and apprentice embalmer. New Heritage Chapel was operated by Mr. Shaw and his wife as a funeral establishment, and the chapel is not a licensed funeral establishment, and Respondent Shaw is not a licensed funeral director or embalmer. New Heritage Chapel was providing adult and infant caskets for sale. Respondent did not have and could not produce a general price list. According to the respondent, the bodies would be prepared at another funeral home in Tennessee, and the funerals would be held at New Heritage Chapel. The respondent, Mr. Shaw, had an apprentice funeral director and apprentice embalmer's license, and they both expired on March 31st of this year. Further, no credit was submitted by Mr. Shaw for his apprenticeships. No licensed funeral director was present at the establishment, and the respondent was operating a funeral establishment and did not have a funeral establishment license or a funeral director or embalmer license. Following the filing of the notice and hearing and charges, the respondent admits the violations and would like to informally settle this matter by the agreed final order. And respondent admits that he has violated the statutes that are listed in the order. I won't bother to list all of them. There are several, but they are in the order if you wish to look at them. The respondent agrees to the following terms under the agreed final order. The respondent will not attempt to use or operate an establishment without an appropriate license. Respondent will not receive any credit for his funeral director and embalmer apprenticeship licenses since the required reports were not submitted. Respondent agrees to a 1-year waiting period from the date of the signing of this agreed final order before applying for an apprentice funeral director and embalmer license with the board. Respondent also agrees to a 1-year waiting period before applying for an owner establishment license with the board. Respondent will be required to pay a civil penalty in the amount of $500. This was reduced from $1,000 in light of the fact that respondent has now closed New Heritage Chapel, is no longer operating a funeral establishment, working at a minimum wage paying job, and has agreed to the 1-year waiting period. Also, respondent will be required to remit the $200 filing fee for filing this matter with the Administrative Procedures Division of the Secretary of State. And the terms of the agreed final order requires that it must be presented, considered, and accepted by the board in order to settle this matter. And Mr. Shaw has already signed the order, so if the board approves, then.
Question. What about, did he file a death certificate with any of the services he handled?
All.
I mean, this is just a question. I mean,
There was no proof that he actually handled any services, but he was operating as a funeral establishment.
he did handle it. Well, good. I mean, that just concerned me that
There's
if
no proof
somebody
of that.
had died and he hadn't done that, that needed to be tended to. License?
I don't recall. I know the board heard of it during their opening dedication service, and so it was not operating for very long, but it was operating.
Move to accept the recommendation of council.
Second.
Have a motion from Ms. Sal and a second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
President Starkey, if you'll sign the order.
What kind of monitoring system is there for a case like this?
I'd be more familiar with that answer.
We found out about it without him advising us that he was in business. So the
Somebody else.
the same
will advise.
monitoring system usually
Okay.
works pretty well if he goes back in business.
The grapevine's still there.
It went
Mr.
pretty quick.
Mr. Bozeman, the field representative, became aware of it, and as Ms. Richardson said, attended the open house or attended near the time of the open house.
Next on the agenda is a legal report from Ellery Richardson, the Assistant General Counsel.
All right, the first cases are case number 2014-031-561 and 2014-031-571. Complainant supplies an advertisement and asks whether it is legal. It is for an entity licensed in Mississippi and run by a Tennessee licensed funeral director and embalmer. The ad states it is affiliated with respondent entities. The advertisement is for cheap cremations. The ad states that you never meet with a funeral director, everything is done over the phone, and all the required documentation will be delivered via FedEx. Respondent states that the affiliation is only common ownership and the complaint should not have been opened against them. My recommendation would be to close the complaint.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Helms, a second from Mr. Cochran. All in favor?
May I ask, what are they saying about common ownership? What does that
It's
mean?
An umbrella corporation owns respondent corporations and the entity in Mississippi that ran the ad. And then it also had, the ad said affiliated with respondent entities.
But they're advertising in Tennessee.
The Mississippi establishment, I mean, I guess the Mississippi entity did state that it did not run its ad in Tennessee, but since it is on the border, occasionally that happens.
Break down the cost on their ad.
Well, since the ad is Mississippi licensed, it's regulated by the Mississippi, their board and their advertising rules.
People in Mississippi all the way down in the Delta take the commercial appeal every day. And they consider that one of their daily papers. So you don't know what paper this is.
I don't recall.
That's a Memphis paper.
It was, the respondent did state that he only ran the ad in Mississippi, but I mean, the town the Mississippi establishment is right near the border, so.
For the question, we had Mr. Helms and Mr. Cochran seconded. Are we ready to proceed? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Ms. Mosley Taylor is now here.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Okay, the next case on the complaint report is case number 2015-000-331 and 2015-000-332. Respondent funeral director's license expired on July 1st and was not renewed until August 9th. During this time, respondent was the manager of the funeral home and served as the funeral director in 4 cases. Respondent apologizes for the oversight. And there is no history, and my recommendation would be for the establishment, a consent order with a civil penalty of $200 and authorization for a hearing, and for the funeral director, a consent order with civil penalty of $200 and authorization for a hearing.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Helms, second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next case is case number 2015-000-221. Inspection revealed that respondent did not have the funeral director and embalmer licenses of one of its employees available for inspection. Additionally, 8 cremation authorization forms were missing, and 11 were not properly signed and dated. It appears that respondent did not receive the renewal notice because he had not updated his address. Respondent states it conducted a full review of all the files and corrected the cremation authorization form issues. My recommendation would be a consent order with a civil penalty of $500 and authorization for a hearing.
My problem is the 8 cremation forms that were missing,
Sorry, what was the question?
found.
Yes.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion from Ms. Taylor, a second from Mr. Helms. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next case is case number 2015-000-361. Respondent did not properly itemize a charge of $352 for 2 contracts, which the respondent stated was for both an alternative container and an urn. Respondent stated that this was a computer glitch that they have corrected. Respondent shows proof that he enters the items separately, but the software was lumping them together. There's no recent history, so my recommendation would be to close.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Helms, a second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next case is case number 2015-000-371. Respondent's establishment license lapsed on December 1st and was not renewed until December 11th. Respondent did not conduct any business during this time period. Additionally, respondent did not have the latest crematory inspection report. This was faxed to respondent during the inspection. So my recommendation would be to close with a letter of warning.
Move to accept recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion from Ms. Sow, a second from Ms. Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next case is case number 2015-002291. Consumer states that her daughter's stepfather passed away and deceased's biological daughter handled the arrangements. Although she and her husband were close friends with the deceased, they were not allowed to attend the memorial service. When they arrived at the funeral establishment, they were told they could not come in. It was extremely humiliating, and many friends and family called asking why they did not come. Respondent states that the daughter of the deceased approached the staff an hour before the service and told them that she did not want complainant's husband to attend the services. The staff did not inquire further and told her that although the funeral home was a public place, the staff would convey her request. Complainant's husband left after the request was conveyed to him and stated that he did not want to cause any trouble. Deceased's biological daughter stated that she requested that he not attend because she wouldn't have felt comfortable with him being there. She also texted her stepsister, who is complainant's daughter, if you can keep track, the day before and told her this. Complainant states that the service should have been announced as private if the daughter was going to bar people from coming. My recommendation would be to close.
Motion to accept recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion for Mr. Cochran and a second for Ms. Sal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next case is case number 2015-003011. Employee of a rival funeral home files a complaint about respondent's billboard, stating that the prices are not itemized. Respondent states that their Simplicity burial package has always been this price, and it is stated as such on their price list. Respondent added an itemization to the billboard before the complaint was filed. So my recommendation would be to close with a letter of warning.
Accept Councilman's recommendation.
Second.
Council's recommendation.
Have a motion from Ms. Taylor, a second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Case number 2015-004341. Respondent's establishment license expired on January 1st and was not renewed until January 19th. Respondent handled 21 cases during this time period, 8 cremations and 13 full cases. Respondent apologizes for missing the renewal date. So my recommendation would be a consent order with a civil penalty of $525 and authorization for a hearing.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion to accept from Mr. Helms, a second from Ms. Taylor and Ms. Sal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Case number 2015-005121 and 2015-005122. Respondent posted on his personal Facebook page that he was the funeral director, embalmer, and manager of an establishment the day before his licenses were granted. They were pending at the time. Respondent stated that after he finished his apprenticeship, he switched firms. He updated his Facebook the week he began working at the new firm to notify his friends and acquaintances where he had gone because he hadn't felt comfortable saying before the firm announced it. He stated that he did not intend the posting to show that he was licensed. In fact, he posted again the day he received his official license from the state. There's no history. My recommendation would be to close with a letter of warning.
Motion to accept Council's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion for Ms. Taylor, a second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Case is case number 2015-005131 and 2015-005132. Complainant alleges that respondent owner, who is unlicensed, is going to homes soliciting families for business, offering $2,400. Respondent denies the allegations and states that their cheapest funeral is $2,995. The complaint was filed using fake addresses and phone numbers, so there is no way to reach the complainant for more information. So my recommendation would be to dismiss.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Helms, a second from Mr. Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next case is case number 2015-005521. Respondent's establishment license expired on November 1st and was not renewed until January 21st. Respondent sold 1 pre-need contract and handled 16 cremations. Respondent apologizes for the oversight. My recommendation would be a consent order with a civil penalty of $750 and authorization for a hearing.
Past history, is all these cases closed?
Yes, they're all
Okay.
closed.
Make a motion, we accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Neal, a second from Mr. Helms. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next case is case number 2015-005531. Inspection revealed that the latest crematory inspection report was not available. 4 cremation authorization forms were not signed by the funeral director. Additionally, 3 contracts had inconsistent prices from the price list, and 2 contracts did not have the reason for embalming listed. Respondent states that it has corrected the problems and has retained a new manager. My recommendation would be a consent order with a civil penalty of $750 and authorization for a hearing.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion from Ms. Taylor, a second from Mr. Helms. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next case, case number 2015-007721, 2015-007722, and 2015-007723. A medical examiner stated that he signed the death certificate of a deceased for respondent establishment. The health department called him later that day and told him that there was another death certificate produced because the deceased's name was misspelled and someone else had signed complainant's name. Complainant then asked for a third death certificate, which he appropriately signed. Complainant sent in copies of all 3 death certificates. Respondent manager states that once she became aware of the situation, she discovered that another funeral director in the firm, which is respondent number 2, took the shortcut of forging the medical examiner's signature. She assured the board that this particular funeral director will no longer be handling death certificates. The funeral director who forged the signature apologizes and states that he has begun seeing a medical professional to deal with his anxiety, which may have contributed to this poor decision. My recommendation would be for the manager to close the letter of warning, for the establishment a consent order and civil penalty of $500 and authorization for a hearing, and for the funeral director a consent order with a civil penalty of $1,000 and authorization for a hearing.
Had this situation several times where people are signing, forging names to documents. This is not the first time. And is that not a felony?
Sure exactly what criminal statute it would fall
Well, on
under.
an official document such as a death certificate that's filed with the state, as permanent record, is that, I mean, how much more official does that get? And forging a medical doctor's name.
I have the maximum penalty for any single violation is $1,000, which I have recommended for the funeral director. But if the board wishes to do something stronger, such as a suspension or something, the board definitely has the authority to do that.
Historically, what's the board done? 1,000?
Yes.
Since I've been here, I think I've seen this maybe once, maybe twice, but I only remember one for sure, and it was $1,000. So it is the maximum civil penalty.
It's severe, and I know what we did last time.
Well, I just don't,
It's
I mean, I think the license should be suspended at least. Oh, that is just terribly serious. And I would think would be criminal.
The board has the authority to suspend the license for any time for any amount of time it deems appropriate. If the board doesn't think that $1,000 is enough, they definitely have the authority to do that.
It is, past case, it's bothered me in the past that we've had people not admit to, but in one case we have, to forging someone's name on an official document, and it just,
Do you know how long the funeral director has had his license?
I could find out, but I'd have to, take a 5-minute break to look that up.
Mr. Taylor, I know he's been licensed for a period of time. I mean, I don't know how many years, but
Time.
for longer than 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
The funeral director did not just receive their license in the last 4 or 5 years, nor 10 years. But I can't remember exactly how.
And just to clarify, just to make sure I understand, the first death certificate, the medical examiner misspelled the decedent's name?
No, what happened is the funeral home prepares the death certificate.
Okay, I got you.
Mr. Gribble, correct me if I'm wrong. And then the medical examiner signs it once he reviews everything. And then there was a misspelling in the initial one that caused the situation. Though, I mean, this was corrected. The medical examiner did sign the third certificate that was filed.
Basically, the funeral director thought he was saving time by forging the name.
Right. It appears that he just didn't want
It
to.
was intentional.
That he didn't want to go back to the health department, and he was just trying to save some time.
He wasn't circumventing the medical examiner and signed it. He just signed a second copy.
His response.
corrected
His
it.
response was, I admit that I made a poor decision in the frustration of misspelling and realizing I had to go through the whole process again. I made the mistake and just decided to do it.
Agree. I think obviously a poor decision, but I think it would have been worse if he had circumvented him from the beginning, if he had just forged the signature. I think that probably makes it worse. In this case, still a bad decision, but
Make a motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion from Ms. Taylor, a second from Mr. Helms. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I wish to be recorded as abstaining.
There is one final case on the report. It is case number 2014-032321. Respondent's manager informed the board that he resigned effective October 31st. At the December 3rd inspection, there was no new manager. Respondent handled 7 cases without a manager of record. Additionally, one contract did not include the reason for embalming and had a price list inconsistency. Respondents stated that they corrected the contract. Additionally, they state that at all times, all cases were handled by another licensed funeral director. This establishment subsequently closed. So my recommendation would be to close since the establishment is now closed.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Helms, a second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
End of my report.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. Next, we'll go to administrative matters, Mr. Robert Gribble.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, we have the licensee report. These are licenses that were administratively approved by the Executive Director pursuant to the Board's authority for the period of April 14, 2015 through May 15, 2015. Establishments and individuals for those. There are no closed establishments that have closing since the last board meeting. Next is a disciplinary action report. This is a report of consent orders administratively accepted or approved by the Executive Director pursuant to the Board authority for the period of April 1, 2015 through April 30th, 2015. And you have a list of those, the violations and the actions, which has been given to you. Last, the open complaint report for this board meeting. These are complaints numbers as of yesterday. Apprentices, funeral directors and embalmers and establishments, a total of 61 open complaints. One of the things that's on just information that's not on the agenda, here at the Department of Commerce and Insurance, we're going through the process of installing a new computer system. This has been planned for a number of years, and it's been worked on extensively for the past few months. I'm glad to say that Ms. Mosby is one of our experts for that. She by far knows much more about it than I do. But anyway, the plan is for that to go live in about the middle of September. So the people that are working on it, one of the things they have determined is that it's much better to have as many renewals and license issued prior to the old system converting over. So a decision has been made that the renewal notices will go out for all licensees, funeral establishments, funeral directors, embalmers, and then on the other side, which is burial services, you know, to the cemeterians, to the pre-need sellers, and to the pre-need sales agents. If there's an expiration between now and the end of November, those are going to go out much sooner. Normally, they're sent out 60 days in advance, but they're going to go out much sooner. I'm not sure, they haven't told us exactly when the funeral board is going out, but they're going to go out in a big number, and I'm sure we'll get calls about it. You may even get some questions about, well, my license doesn't expire till November. Why are you sending me a renewal notice in the middle of May or middle of June? Of course, they can wait if they want to, you know, but what we would encourage them to do is to use the online renewal process and renew before this old system goes down at the end of August. Pardon?
August 31st.
August 31st will be when the old system will be retired. So it would help us tremendously. We can give better service to the licensees if they will do that. So we're hoping that that will happen. And of course, for those that don't, we'll be glad to work with those. But there's going to be a period of time that we won't be able to issue a renewal notice or a license, a window there from the changing of one system to the new system. So we just encourage everyone to renew early, especially if they have a August or September, you know. And for those in July, we hope they've already renewed, but by August the 31st. But and this new system will have a lot of conveniences and a lot of abilities that the old system doesn't have. But this is a problem. We just don't want people to fall within that period where they let their license expire, and then, of course, if they do and we can't renew it, then if there are any complaints, we'll make you aware of the time that we couldn't renew it, you know, the period, because obviously it wouldn't be fair to hold them responsible for the days that we're unable to renew it. But we don't want them to become expired. We want them to continue to have an active status. And there will be mailings that will go out and information and things like that. But just wanted to make you aware of that in case you get questions. And just, if you do, refer them to the office, and we'll be glad to address those questions. But, Mr. President, that concludes my report.
Motion to accept the report.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Helm, second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Next will be our legislative update. Mr. Gribble.
Okay. As you, I'm sure, are aware, the legislative session is now over. There were two separate bills that became public chapters, which were passed and were enacted as public chapters. The first one deals with House Bill 0163, Senate Bill 0194, which applies directly to this board. It was funeral directors and embalmers. It clarified the two members of the funeral directors and embalmers with clarifies that the two members of the Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers with a minimum of 5 consecutive years' experience in the state immediately preceding their appointment shall be licensed as funeral directors and embalmers or both. In other words, what it does, it gives prior to this legislation passing this session, supposedly the board was to have two members who only had a single license, that they were licensed either as a funeral director or an embalmer. So as you're aware, Mr. Patterson's term expired December 31st. Of course, there's not been an appointment made yet, so he still continues to serve until there's an appointment made. But under the old law, it would have been necessary to have appointed someone who had a single license, who was licensed either as a funeral director or an embalmer. With this legislation passing, now the governor has the leeway to appoint someone who is a funeral director, embalmer, or who has both licenses. It gives a little bit more leeway that. Also, it requires that any inspection of a funeral establishment that has a crematory, that the inspection must be done by an individual representing the board who is certified as a crematory operator, and all three of our field reps are certified crematory operators as well as myself, so that we're already in compliance with that. We don't have to do anything new in order to come in compliance with that. This was effective upon becoming law, so it's in effect now. It's part of the law now. The other thing, which doesn't directly affect the board, but to make you aware of, it was a bill that was sponsored by the Cemetery Association of Tennessee, House Bill 1307, Senate Bill 1235. It passed. It was been enacted as public chapter number 288, and there are several changes there, and that's included for your information, and has been sent to your email address, so you have it for retention in case you want to know what these two bills, what they do, and what effect they have on funeral homes and funeral service and cemeteries as well. Have any questions, Ms. Richardson or I-1 will be glad to answer those, but that concludes the legislative update. Ask it we get a motion so that the board accepts it.
Do I have a motion?
Move to accept the report, the legislative report.
I have a motion from Ms. Sal, a second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Next will be approval of license applications.
There are no individuals to appear before the board today, and there's one establishment. The establishment is Church and Chapel Funeral Service, LLC, located at 105 Main Street in Portland, Tennessee. It's a new establishment. The ownership's a limited liability company. The owner being Church and Chapel Funeral Service, LLC, 105 Main Street, Portland, Tennessee. Mr. McCoy, if you will, come up to one of the mics at the desk and just pull the microphone down and introduce yourself to the board and make whatever opening remarks that you would like to make to the board. Just go ahead and pull that microphone down, and when you talk, yes sir, when you talk it should turn red.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Gribble. My name is Robert McCoy. I will be the managing funeral director of a firm that will be known as Church and Chapel Funeral Service in Portland. And that's about all I have to say.
Several pages, Mr. McCoy, that for the board to look through on their iPad. While they're looking at that, the initial application fee and licensure fee was paid by a cemetery in Franklin, Kentucky. what's the relationship between that cemetery and you or your?
The cemetery wrote those checks for those applications because at the time we were not a licensed firm. We did not have a checking account. And so the cemetery took care of that for us on our behalf.
Unfortunately.
I noticed the checks were returned insufficient. Was there?
Paid the fees, and we also paid for the re-inspection fee also.
Picture this Affordable Casket and Monument Company. Is that a separate entity? Is it the same company?
It's the same company.
Two different names?
Yes, sir. We are changing the name because we are becoming a funeral establishment. Affordable Casket and Monument Company was the casket store. They did funeral services or anything funeral related at all.
Is there any common ownership between the cemetery and the new proposed establishment?
Are you the owner of the new establishment? Sole owner? Or?
This Nashville Funeral and Cremation Service is going to provide your removal and embalming and cremations. You're not going to have any of that available at your firm?
No, ma'am.
So you are still a casket store?
Well, we will be a funeral establishment in the sense that we can make funeral arrangements there, and we can also do funeral services, but we will not have facilities for embalming or cremation, and so we have to have a licensed Tennessee facility to do that on our behalf.
Still a casket store?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Gribble, on this notice of violation, has this all been taken care of?
Yes, Mr. Kesey says that in his April 27th inspection, he did a memo talks about the re-inspection charge of $200, which Mr. McCoy says they've paid, and it has been paid. Did the first inspection on April the 2nd. That's when the notice of violation warning was issued because there were several exceptions noted at that time. And then he went back on April the 27th, and he said most of the items were corrected when he arrived, and those that were not were corrected on site. And when he completed the inspection, there was no exceptions noted, and are in order.
Yeah, public restrooms, it's in operation order then.
Yes, sir.
At your establishment, are you planning on doing pre-need and at-need funerals?
Eventually. We're not going to do pre-need in the beginning because I haven't applied for a pre-need seller's license yet. So our main focus will be, until I do that, will be at-need services only.
Make a motion to accept his application license.
I have a motion from Ms. Taylor.
Question, looking at the photographs, I see the picture of the Affordable Casket Monument Company. In your new application, is your location changing? I mean, this is going to be the funeral home, just caskets on display. Are you planning on having visitations at this location or services at this location?
We have an agreement with area churches. We will be planning on having visitation and funeral services at those churches.
Nothing on site. This is basically just a business office.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion from Ms. Taylor and a second from Mr. Cochran. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Ms. Mosley, will you call the roll, please?
Mark Cawthron,
Aye.
Robert Helms,
Yes.
David Neal,
Yes.
Jane Gray Sowell,
No.
Robert Starkey,
Yes.
Anita Taylor.
Yes.
Mr. President, we have 5 yes and 1 no.
Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
We'll get your license issued, Mr. McCoy, and we'll send you an email hopefully later today or tomorrow, early tomorrow, if not today.
All right. Thank you very much.
Is there any new business to come before the board? Being none, we'll call for adjournment. Do I have a motion?
Move.
Second.
Have a motion. Mr. Helms, second from Ms. Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.